Welcome to Founder Unfiltered. Founder Unfiltered is the show about stuff founders don't normally talk about. The identity crisis where you go from operator to leader, the weird shame of self-promotion, the gap between who you are and who your business needs you to be. This show gets into the psychology, the patterns, and the honest conversations that actually move the needle. No hacks, no hype, just the raw truth about what really holds founders back. I'm Bradley Jacobs, the founder and CEO of Mylance, and your host today. Today, I have Robin Daniels. Robin has held executive roles at Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Matterport, and WeWork, helped 3 of them go public. He's now Chief Business Officer at Zensai, leading marketing, product, partnerships, and growth, and co-author of the Human Success Playbook, a framework for building human-first, AI-powered teams. What I find most compelling about Robin isn't just the resume, which is certainly impressive, but it's his conviction that high performance and deep humanity aren't in tension, and what it actually costs leaders who try to separate the two. He's Danish by birth, Californian by choice. Robin, welcome to the show.
That was the longest intro, but I love it. It was great. Thank you. It's good to see you, Brad.
Yeah, good to have you. I got to make sure everyone knows what the hell is going on here, you know?
And just so the trolls don't come after me, it's 2.5 IPOs, not 3. So
2.5.
Box and Matterport. And I was actually at NASDAQ with the team at WeWork planning for the IPO. And of course, that never happened, at least not under my watch. But so 2.5.
We were, man, just to go on a quick tangent to start off, I was at Uber back in the day when things in 2017 were a complete shit show. Travis gets sued from his own company, kicked out of his own company. We have like a board of advisors as our CEO. Like I honestly felt like we were pretty close to becoming the WeWork situation. I don't know if you'd agree or disagree with that, but I'm like, I think it was pretty damn close.
I think it was very close. Everything was very close. And it's one of those things, right? I mean, Uber, obviously, they pulled in a great CEO who's kind of really turned that thing around. And it's funny, actually, I was in conversations with joining Uber in 2016, 2017. I remember meeting with Travis, and I just thought, that culture was not for me, and I ended up joining LinkedIn. So I joined WeWork, and that ended up also going very sideways. But it's interesting. I mean, there's still WeWork around. They still help create the category of co-working. Right? So I'm very proud of all of that. The team I met there was just phenomenal. Of course, it didn't go anywhere near the way that I thought it was going to go when I joined, or as well as Uber has kind of turned things around. But the fact that there's still like a whole category around this that I think WeWork still sits at the core of it, was something fun to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly still a staple in the co-working space and real estate. I think I just have a lot of compassion for those earlier WeWork folks, who had the equity and had massive promises of what it would be worth and all that kind of stuff. Exactly, and to go, I don't know exactly what happened to everyone, but that was brutal.
I mean, I had people like, buying houses and putting down, like buying expensive stuff because on paper they were worth a lot of money. I mean, I wasn't worth a lot of money on paper for a while, but I was only there for a year, so it didn't, I don't think, impact me psychologically as much as some of the people who were there, like you said, from the very early days who kind of seen it grow up. I mean, even in the year I was there, I came in at a valuation of $20 billion, and then we went to $47 billion, and then we were going to go IPO, and then it all came crashing. But even in that short year, it was so crazy. I'm sure Uber was probably very similar. I mean, I think there's probably some parallels. If you had a Venn diagram between Travis and Adam, there's probably some overlap. A lot of differences, obviously, as well, but probably some overlap as well.
And one thing, just since we're on the topic, is what I saw both of these men do incredibly well. And I'm going to say well, because I think it absolutely benefited them, and maybe a bit of a drawback, but there's this delusion of reality. And I almost as a founder, that delusion supports you in lots of ways of like, I'm going to create the biggest, most successful thing. I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to raise all the money. I'm going to enroll everybody in my vision. You're going to give me money. You're going to come work for me. I mean, they're totally delusional.
Exactly.
And it works in their favor for the most part.
It's completely true. It's good. I mean, I was working at LinkedIn, good company, good CEO. They paid well, all that kind of stuff, right? Stable company. And it was just acquired by Microsoft. But also, honestly, a little bit like lacking, I think, of that vision. And it was a little boring, honestly, sometimes. Right? I was very like process oriented, very kind of big company. And then I ended up meeting Adam Newman, and I was like, this guy had just vision coming out of his ears, right? Like what it could be and what we're going to build and the impact we're going to have. And when you're in that kind of mind space of like, I want to make some shit happen, then it's very attractive, right? Obviously, like you said, there's a lot of drawbacks, right? And like they kind of warp reality. And we've seen that many times with, I think, some of these incredible CEOs. And there's a very fine line, I think, between being delusional and being like, it's just an exceptional visionary. And, I think when I look back on my career, it's like Salesforce. I mean, Mark Benioff is an incredible visionary. I mean, sometimes he's been too far ahead and he had to pull it back, but a lot of times he's been right. Aaron Levy, same thing. And, like some of these CEOs have just been phenomenal in being able to like predict the future or maybe will it into existence. Maybe it's a mix of both, right? Travis was certainly of that ilk as well.
Yeah, it's a create the future, right? I'm going to
create the future.
And it was talk about culture. Like, sure, Uber had its toxic culture for sure back in the day, but it was built into the fabric of the company of we are revolutionizing transportation globally.
Yeah.
Right. Transportation is reliable as running water. Like I haven't worked at the company in 8 years and I remember that as if it were yesterday because it was woven into every team meeting, every documentation, core values of the company. I mean, a lot of companies don't do that well at all. And as you said, it's attractive to go work for. Like I was young, I was ambitious, I was hungry. I was like, you want to go change the world? I don't actually care about transportation. I'm going to be honest. Like it is not exciting to me. It's not. I don't really care.
Totally.
But to give me that much ownership and follow someone who's like, let's change the world. I mean, sign me up, right? I took a pay cut. I worked my ass off. It was my life. I mean, it's enrolling as hell.
Exactly. What you said. Salesforce, at least when I was there, sold a CRM system. Kind of boring, honestly. Box sells a file sharing platform. Kind of boring. I mean, and WeWork is kind of a real estate platform. Not the most exciting, right? None of these like consumer sexiness around them, but they never preached it like that. Like with WeWork, it was always about how do we bring people together in the most positive way possible to kind of share the energy and the insights and the intelligence that we all have to create something better together. And the best space for doing that is the office where people spend most of their lives. So let's revolutionize that. And same with like Box was all about most enterprise software just sucks. And that's even what we talked about a lot internally. How do we make it interesting and sexy and fun again, right? And so I think you have to kind of warp reality because you also want to get people with you on that journey. If you want to attract the best of the best, you're not going to get that, right? This is why like I think insurance companies have such a hard time with attracting talent. I remember when I went to LinkedIn, one of my first events I went to was an event for like 100 CHROs from one of the biggest companies in the world. And they were all kind of sharing a lot of these CHROs, what they were struggling with. And the number one thing for insurance companies was we just can't attract talent because nobody wants to come work for us. Well, because it's such a boring thing. You got to figure out how to make it interesting. I mean, you could argue, is insurance more boring than a CRM platform or real estate? Maybe not, but it's about how you package it up and, sell it so you can attract great talent to come work for you. Anyway, I think we're going off on lots of tangents here. You and I could probably talk about WeWork and Uber all day long.
Totally. But I think this nugget that we're, and then we'll get back to, I have a whole, agenda here. But the nugget of it doesn't necessarily matter what your product is. There is a way of presenting it and creating a culture around a vision that can enroll some of the best people in the world to come work for you and support that vision.
Yeah, and I've always had the mindset that even though if you look at my background, I've only worked at B2B companies my whole career, right? Even though I've always been attracted to B2C. And honestly, if you ask anybody, and I've done this a lot because I do a lot of these workshops and marketing. If you ask anybody, tell me your three brands. Tell me your three brands that are like top of mind for you or your favorite brands. They always come back with like Nike and Patagonia and Tesla and Apple and so on. It's always consumer brands. And so the answer, because I'm out there talking about B2B marketing and so on. The answer is obvious. Then go market yourself like a B2C company. So even though I've only worked at a B2B company, and all these companies are, I've always had the mindset, we got to make the story interesting. We got to have an emotional hook. We got to market ourselves like a B2C company. And sometimes I've been more successful at that than others. Sometimes it gets too much into the speeds and fees and the complexity of it. It just never gets people excited. The way I would phrase it just very simply is people always buy with emotion, but they always support with logic, facts, and data, never the other way around. And this is what consumer companies get really well. Like hook it with an emotion. Of course, I get a B2B sales infinitely more complex than a B2C sale. You have to convince your CFO and your VP sales and your legal team and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't change the fact that you got to get that main buyer, your champion, hooked with an emotional thing where they can see a better future, either for themselves, for their team, for the company. Then they'll go to bat for you internally, and they'll use facts and logic and emotion and all this stuff to kind of like convince the other people, the buyers internally. But you gotta lead with an emotional hook.
I love that. And I think it's important to call out, even if your buyer is a big business, there is a person on the other end of that, as you said, is kind of going to bat for you. Like, you are still selling to an individual.
That's right.
Right. Which is,
that's
that
right.
emotional
That's
piece.
right.
I love that.
And those people,
by,
there's people when they're not serious in an office with their shirt and tie or whatever, they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're doing all the same shit that we are, right? So it's like, just talk to them like they're a human being, really.
I get all the time. They're like, my buyer's not on LinkedIn. Like, they're busy doing all this other shit. I'm like, no, they're not. They're human, right? They're scrolling LinkedIn like the rest of us.
Exactly. And it's not LinkedIn. They're definitely on TikTok or Instagram.
For sure. Yeah. It's like all these platforms have 1 billion plus users. Like, you're trying to tell me that they're not there. Like, no way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Let's go back to you. So I want to start at the beginning of, you're from Copenhagen, and then you bought a one-way ticket to California.
Yes.
Most people don't do that. Like, what was the courage? Were you running away from something? Like, what prompted that move?
It's like, you can only really understand your life when you look backwards, right? As the famous saying goes. And I think it's probably a mix of all those things. At the point in time, I was 21. Everything was just like possibility. And I thought my life in Denmark, honestly, was just boring and unambitious. And the people around me were just kind of unambitious, if I'm honest about it. And I just wanted to like go a place where I kept reading about, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what background you have, what school you went to. As long as you come and you work hard and you have ambition, you can make anything happen. And this just really spoke to me. And I just always felt like, well, I want to give it a go. I mean, if I don't make it, I can always come back to Denmark. Denmark's not going away. It's been around for 1,000 years, so it's not going anywhere. I've got family and siblings. I can always go crash on their couch if I need to, but I don't want to look back on my life when I'm 50, 60, 70 years old and regret not having the courage to go. And, now I'm getting in real life, closer to 50. And I'm like, I still have that drive. I don't want to look back. I don't want to live my life with any regret. But I was also kind of escaping. I mean, it was both the opportunity itself. I think everything was happening in Silicon Valley at that point in time. I think this is like late 90s when I was reading about Silicon Valley, and there just wasn't anything really happening anywhere else. I mean, yes, you might find a tech company in Copenhagen, in Berlin, in London, whatever, but you didn't find like the massive, like just momentum that you were seeing in Silicon Valley. So it just sounded like paradise to me, honestly. It sounded like this is where you go and you're just surrounded day and night by people who just want to make shit happen. But it was also, I mean, like, I didn't want to end up like, it sounds horrible now. And I think, but the thinking I had at the time, I didn't want to end up like my parents, honestly. It's like, got divorced when I was young. They were always struggling financially. They didn't have their shit together. Now I think I'm a little older. I'm a little bit more compassionate about how hard it is to just live life, and kind of everyone gets punched in the face, right? And everyone has struggles. But at that point in time, I'm just like, I didn't want that to be my future. And so I also wanted to kind of escape that a little bit and go over and just kind of create something brand new for myself, kind of escape the shackles of my kind of inherited past, if that makes sense, that many of us kind of probably try to do. And so that's why I went. And, the first year was tough. I mean, I had a couple of jobs, didn't really pan out. And then over time, that kind of accumulated into a successful career. But the beginning was tough. But again, I was 21 when I came. So at that point in time, it sounds great, and I'm very proud of myself. It was probably, when I look back on the biggest thing I ever did in my life, it was probably that thing, if I'm honest about it. People ask, oh, was it the birth of your son, or was it you're getting married? I'm like, no, it was me having the courage to make that choice, because that changed everything about my future. But I was also 21, right? I mean, like, when you're that age, you don't have that much to lose. Would I do it now, with what I have and what I've kind of like built up? I'd like to think so, but I'm honestly not sure. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever had those moments in your life, Bradley, where you had to like make those kind of calls where you had to project yourself into the future and make sure, like, I don't regret not having the courage to go.
Yeah. And what I want to hit on too is there's a few things that can drive that decision or lack of decision. And what I'm hearing is what you did, and I've done the same thing, is to say, I can always come back. I would rather do this thing, take the leap, and fail at it, whatever that means. I'd rather do that than not try it at all and be stuck in where I'm at or in the status quo. And I mean, it's the same thing I've done to say, like, okay, when I was in consulting before I joined Uber, my consulting's not going anywhere.
It's not
right?
It's true.
If this thing at Uber doesn't work out, I'm sure I can get back another job at consulting, right? It's the same kind of idea. And I actually interviewed someone recently who really talked about the difference between high performers and not. And one of the biggest differences is they are terrified by not trying. Like that fear is a much higher driving force than the fear of like projected failure of, if I try this thing and it doesn't work out, then what does it mean about me?
You know, it's a beautiful way of putting it. I have to kind of constantly remind myself, as I've gotten older and more experienced, to still have that courage, right? And not just get too comfortable, because it gets easy kind of getting comfortable, I think, in many ways in your life, in your work, and so on. And I think, you know, now more than ever, you need courage in order to break through, in order to succeed, in order to kind of like make something happen. I mean, there's so many opportunities out there, which is insanely great, but there's also just a lot of noise. So if you want to actually stand out in any way, personally, professionally, your company, you got to have some courage to do so. And I'm constantly trying to remind myself, and that's why I write about this a lot on LinkedIn, because it's kind of like a daily reminder to myself, but also to my team, because I know everybody on my team reads, you know, what I post. So that's a way of like trying to inject some daily encouragement around, just go take some chances. Because I feel like I see this a lot in the last couple of years, maybe the last decade, and kind of the way companies are built. There's a lot of like, let me go talk to somebody, let me get the safety and committees and numbers and so on, versus having the personal courage to just kind of go for it, you know? Like, why are you asking me this? Just go. I get this all the time, you know, both with my existing company, but also even the past companies, like somebody coming and asking me for something that's just kind of very basic. I'm like, why? Yeah, just go for it. Just have the courage to make a call. If it's right, great. And if not, you learn from it. I'm not gonna fire you for it. It's like, just go for it, right? Because it also just speeds everything up. And I think some of the companies that we've talked about here in the beginning, they have that kind of built into the culture. I'm curious. One of the things that was so fascinating when I went to WeWork, right? Coming back to that, I went from LinkedIn to WeWork, but the companies were about the same size, but they operated so differently. Both were about just over 10,000 people. And LinkedIn had been around for a long time, a lot of committees, very professionally run company. And there's some beauty in that. And then WeWork was just pure chaos, like every week. And and Adam always said, we can do more probably in a week than most companies can do in a year. That was kind of like the thing he always said to us, right? And to try to push the boundaries of what we thought was possible. And the happy medium is maybe somewhere in between, but I love that being able to like push that. I got the sense from the outside of Uber that was probably very similar, like this obsession with speed and execution versus like sitting and trying to get every single fact right. Sometimes I would sit in like some meetings in LinkedIn. I'm like, wow, we're debating something that we know we need to act on. And then the conclusion is, well, let's get some more data and come back here in 3 months and discuss it. I'm like, really? We kind of know-ish what to do. Let's just go for it. You know, we don't have perfect data, but do we need that in order to act? You know, it's like, yeah, very interesting. How was it? Yeah. How was it at Uber? Similar way or something different?
Yeah. And one of the culture values back in the day was big, bold bets. And it was, you need to always, as your team, be making not the incremental 10, 20, 30%, but what is the big bet that if it pays off is 2, 3, 5, 10x. And you always needed big, bold bets going on in your city. Like originally I was a city team manager. So always, always, always. And then when it would work out, you would then share the best practice across all the cities. And then all the cities would adopt this new thing that you did. It was move fast. It was break shit. It was you're the owner. That was another cultural value, owner, not a renter. So I'm like, I'm not like renting this situation. Like I'm in full ownership. It is mine. You know, it was baked into the culture. Move fast, play massive. And, you know, there was healthy competition among city teams and metrics and growth and the whole thing, Robin. Sure. It was wild.
That's awesome.
One of the things that I'm curious about, and you've talked about this publicly, is, you know, it's not you at some point in your career, and this probably happened relatively early on, you go from the doer to this isn't your job anymore. Like, in fact, maybe your job is to make yourself totally irrelevant. That's how I've thought about being a manager. And I know you've talked about that. I'm curious when you realized like that was what needed to happen, and then how did you actually make that transition from I'm going to go do all the shit to I'm going to empower other people and maybe hold the vision of where we need to go?
The way I've always done this is I've always tried to have really good role models in my life. Ideally at work, because these are the people you spend the most time with. So that's why I care so much about the people that I work for or the people that I work with, because they end up inspiring me to act better and different every single day. And that's how I kind of learned around how do you make that transition? Because I've seen so many people fail in that transition from individual rock star contributor to manager and so on, because suddenly they have to think they have to do it all. And there's no better, faster way to disempower a team than to try to like do their job or micromanage them. Every single fucking person hates micromanagement without exception, I think. I don't think I've ever met anyone. Maybe they exist out there who loves micromanagement. But so many managers, when they become manager for the first time, I see them do that. They go in and they try to micromanage every action, every decision, every email that goes out, every decision that goes out on a brand campaign or whatever it is. And there's just no better way to get a really subpar result, to disempower the team, to make the team feel like they don't really matter and they're just cogs in a wheel. I've always seen managers around me like who've done the opposite. Like they just like give you the freedom to go and to, yes, ideally be right, but also be spectacularly wrong and kind of fail in your own merit and not be punished for it. And just kind of like celebrate that and celebrate it publicly. Like, we tried this, you had the courage to try it and it didn't work, but here's what we learned from it. There's no such thing as failure. It's just either you succeed or you learn. That's kind of like the mindset that I had very early on. But a lot of it's due to the people around me. I mean, like, it's also why I'm so passionate about this idea of surrounding yourself with great people. I am under no illusion that there's some things that I'm very good at, but I am where I am because so many people along the way have believed in me or inspired me or given me the kind of the skills and knowledge that I needed to be successful in many ways. And I think what I learned about leadership is my job is to set the bar really high, to provide a direction, but not the roadmap for how exactly you get there. People are smart. They can figure it out. And they're probably not going to take the exact same path that I would take. And that's okay. Just having that confidence and trust that they will take a path that they think is right to get from A to B is great. Maybe different than my path that I would have taken to get there. For example, this morning, I was just reviewing a whole big like email sequence that's going out because we're redoing our pricing and packaging to all our customers around the world. If I'd written it, it would probably have come out quite differently. But what they came out with was beautiful and elegant and self-explanatory. And it kind of told our customers everything they needed to know about this. And I'm just like, it's great. It's great to have a team that can just kind of do this. So one of the things I've become very aware of right now, and I'm actually trying to really encourage ownership in our own company, because I kind of run most of the company with our CEO, is that you don't need to ask everybody for opinion. I think we've come into this sense in a lot of companies, even our company sometime, and we're a small company with about 200 people, where we get too many people involved. And the problem, if you ask a smart person for an opinion, they'll end up having one. And it's great, but you don't need it, right? And it just slows things down. Like if I go ask our CFO for feedback on a marketing campaign, he's a smart guy. He'll have an opinion about it. If I go ask Nina, our Chief Human Success Officer, on, what our branding and our event should look like, she'll have an opinion about it because she's really smart. Do I need her opinion? Do I need his opinion? Not really, right? We have just trust each other to do this. I would say you do that, of course, with the smaller things, maybe even the medium-sized things. If it's a really big thing, yeah, you probably want to have a few people in your corner who can kind of validate and vouch that this is the right thing you do. But in general, just like optimize for speed and trust. I think that's the best way to do it. To come back to your question, I learned that very early on. It took me a little while because, again, when you move from being an individual to like a manager, the natural instinct is you want to get involved in a lot of things, but you also just realize it doesn't scale. You'll burn yourself out. I mean, the most stressed I've ever been in my career by far has been middle management. And I see this with other middle managers as well, because you're managing down, you're managing up, you're managing sideways, and you're trying to do all the work at the same time. It's really tough to be in the middle layer, right? So the only way you survive that, I think, really well and not burn out and not lose your sanity is by delegating and trusting, or else you'll just burn yourself out.
Well, it's something you mentioned earlier in our conversation as well, is creating the environment where if you make a mistake or something doesn't work, it's okay. And we'll learn from it and we'll get better and we'll iterate. And I think it's the fear of making a mistake, the fear of quote unquote failure, which, as you said, doesn't really exist, right? When we really come from that place of like, you basically can't fuck this up, right? Like, use your best judgment, use the data, use the best. Because look, Uber was a very data driven company. But to your point, right, we wouldn't go say, like, oh, let me go collect data for 3 more months. We'd say, like, let's take the data we have, right? Our best guess, and then let's ship the damn thing and see what happens. It was okay to make mistakes. I made a massive mistake in my first 3 weeks of the company, and I was like full of shame. I was like, do I get fired? And my boss was like, she's like, did you learn from it? And I was like, oh yeah, like, here's what I'm gonna do differently next time. She's like, great, let's move on. Like, that was her mentality. And I will never, it has shaped who I am as a leader in how she handled that mistake for me. It was amazing.
I think it's hard to get to this point of our stage of our career and lives without having quite a few of those. I had one very early on where I had to go present. I've been at this company for about 2 months, Veritas, and I was the product marketing manager for this product line. I had to go present to 300 salespeople in Orlando, Florida, where we had a big office. And I just completely bombed this presentation. I fucked it up so bad. And I was so embarrassed. I thought for sure I was going to get fired. And I even had some people come up to me afterwards and the sales team going like, hey, Robin, are you okay? Like, it hasn't gone well when they come and ask you that. My manager was just great about it. Just like, hey, this is a learning moment, like, just, you'll improve. Right? It can only go up from here, instead of like reaming me out about it, because this was an important moment, right? I was trying to do some enablement around a new product we were launching, and pricing and packaging. It was horrible. So I think there's motivation comes in two ways. And it's another thing I've become obsessed about. There's the external motivation that you get that can be forced upon you by your manager or your boss, right? Like my boss was very supportive and kind of said, hey, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. Here's some things I think you should do. But I think that what's even more powerful is the internal motivation. That's kind of what I heard you say, but it's also the same. It's like, in my mind, I go, I never want to have this happen again. So I became like really like sure that I wanted to go learn everything about like, how do you deliver a great presentation? How do you structure it? How do you deliver it? How do you talk? So I went on all these courses, listened to all these things, read a lot of books about it. Just like, I just wanted to constantly level up that thing. But the internal motivation was even more powerful, I think, in some ways than the external motivation, just because that fear of shame, failure, getting fired, it's like, it's a feeling that you never want to have again. It's so awful when it happens. That moment when you go, am I going to get fired? You've definitely had that a few times. And it's like, oh, it's rough.
Yeah.
But you know what's funny is even now, again, I'm been a CMO a few times, taking a few companies public, as you mentioned. I still sometimes have that fear. It's weird how it kind of will creep up every now and then. I mean, maybe it's kind of that imposter syndrome. I'll sit in a meeting and go like, okay, they're going to find out that I don't really know what I'm talking about. And they're going to fire me.
Yeah.
Like, so be it. Maybe it never goes. Yeah. Maybe it's a good thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to the coin, and I actually just shared this on LinkedIn, but some of the most decorated actresses, singers, Nobel Prize winners, they have these same thoughts of like, oh my God, everyone's going to find out I'm a fraud. Everyone's going to find out I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. And I pulled some quotes and shared it on LinkedIn. And it's wild. It was like Emma Watson, I think I was one of the quotes. And it's crazy to realize that they're the same human, and it doesn't matter your level of success. In fact, the more success you have, usually the greater it is, because you're on these massive stages. Maybe you're the best in the world in what you do. And you're like, I'm just a human that has flaws and I make mistakes and, whatever, but I practice my craft, for thousands and thousands of whatever. Right. Like, so it's very normal.
I'm better with it now. I don't know if it ever goes away, but it's certainly come less, because what you realize, and what I've definitely realized, I think, especially in my 30s, like you just said, everyone has these feelings. Everyone. And I think actually it's quite positive. You don't want to have it so much that it debilitates you. There's no doubt about that, which I think it can do for some people. But having a little bit of it, I think just kind of forces you to level up, constantly think about what can I do better. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. That's kind of at least how I've decided to interpret it and embrace it in my life. Because you also just realize every single person sitting in that meeting having some version of that feeling themselves.
When it comes up with people when I'm on a call, I usually ask, like, what is the voice saying? It's almost like you distancing who they are from the voice. because it really is just a voice, and it might be like your dad's voice or, somebody else from your childhood or whatever, but it's not you. And when people can realize like, cool, there's this voice telling me that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I'm like, is that true? Right. And maybe even if it is like a little bit true, does it matter? No one knows what they're doing. We're all just making this up. Right.
I remember sitting in a meeting at Box, right? And we were talking about hiring some people because we were in a growth spurt. And it was like, we're going to hire people from Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, and MIT. And I'm just like, I didn't go to any of those schools. I'm not even close to going to any of those schools. What does that say about me? It's like, let me just, right.
Around the topic of imposter thoughts is kind of the fear that comes up a lot on putting yourself out there, whether it's putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, one of the other social channels, doesn't really matter. There's the fear of judgment, rejection, fear of being cringy, self-promotion, which is really just the same fear of judgment, right? I know you share a lot on LinkedIn. How do you think about it? And what would you say to those founders who are basically too scared to put themselves out there?
I started doing this many years ago. Even before I was at LinkedIn, I started sharing. And it was just like, kind of intermittent to begin with. It wasn't very frequent. And then actually, one of the things that's so beautiful about posting, whether that's LinkedIn or whatever platform you choose, is you kind of get instant feedback. And so I learned it was kind of a great way to start validating some of the things that I had in my head, around marketing strategies or leadership strategies, culture, and so on. You get instant feedback. You can see if you're on the right track, if you're not on the right track, what people think about it. Sometimes some things take off because they're really kind of resonating. So it was really great. And I just started posting more and more because it also became a kind of a version of like personal therapy in some ways. So just kind of getting these thoughts that I have in my head out there and having them stuck in my head. And so it kind of becomes self-fulfilling. And I started then taking it more seriously because I could also see what it did for my personal brand. Like, would get customers suddenly. I get invited to do keynotes at some places, do podcasts and do articles and all kinds of cool things. Job opportunities started coming in more frequently, which was great as well. And so there was just like all these benefits. And then I realized, when I was at WeWork, when I went there as the head of marketing, I ended up having the biggest team that I'd ever managed in my life. Beforehand, at LinkedIn, I had a team of just over 50 people. And at WeWork, it was about 400 people and spread out over, 30 different countries. And I've always had global teams, so you kind of had to connect with them in various ways. But there was just like so many people on the team that I would never actually get to talk to, like, because there were so many layers in that team. And so it's impossible to spend all my days doing one-on-one with these. And one of the things I realized fairly quickly was when I would post on LinkedIn, though, everyone would see what I would post. So it's kind of like, in some ways, I started seeing it as instead of having like an all hands, which a lot of times you'll do every month, right? Like most departments will do one every month. The company will do one every month. I just started posting daily, and like everyone on my team could kind of see what's top of mind for me today. It becomes like a little bit of motivation for them, but also a little bit of like direction in some ways. So I figured out that LinkedIn actually is the best internal communication tool that you could ever have in your life by far. Because how often, you were at a big company, how often would you see people on your team, like in the cities team, and as you grew in your career, right? It's just hard to speak to these people all the time. But here is something that, again, people will see most of it. But I also, it went beyond my team. Suddenly I started getting, lots of like notifications from people in engineering or in sales or other parts of the business to say, hey, what you just posted really helped me. And now I understand what it is that we're trying to do here and so on. It just became kind of like this really great thing. The thing I would say about like getting started is that you just have to kind of start putting things out there. The thing to remember is people are so busy. They're not going to remember what you posted in 2 days. So just start getting into the habit of posting something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a brilliant thought. Not every thought you have has to like be an Einsteinian thought that's going to change the world. Just start posting some stuff that you care about. And the easiest thing to post about are things that you're passionate about. For me, I post about culture and leadership, brand and marketing, and kind of like the courage that you need to have in your life in order to live a better, more fulfilled life. These are kind of like the pillars that I would always post about. I rarely post about anything else because those are my 3 topics. So find what you care about. Is it 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things? I wouldn't probably go beyond 3 because then it just becomes a little too dilutive. But you can find different angles around those different things that you can talk about. So that's the first thing. Find some things you're passionate about. The second thing is then you decide what kind of content you post. I see some people, they post a lot of like commentary about what's happening in the world, whether that's AI, technology, new businesses, blah, blah, blah. do whatever you want. And I post more like evergreen content. My content is stuff that you could read it a year from now, 2 years from now, and it kind of will have the same impact. It's not like trying to make a commentary on what's happening in the world or something. I'll do that every now and then, but very, very rarely, because I just think my content, the way I see the content I put out and the brand I want to have is much more around this like long lasting effect and so on. And then the final kind of framework that I use roughly, it's just kind of my rough mental model, is that, and I would recommend this for CEOs who are just getting started, or any founder who's kind of thinking about, I want to get a brand out there, but how do I do it in the right way where it's not self-promotional, to your question? I use the model that's 90, 9, or 1. So 90% of my content is usually around things I'm passionate about. Again, culture, leadership, brand marketing, and so on. 9% of my content roughly is like where I will give a high five to somebody on my team or in the company who's done a great job. Hey, Susan just did this, and Thomas just did this, and great kudos to you for leading this project. And so on. Just creates good like momentum, and people always like getting called out. And it's like creates this sense of belonging and being part of something. And then 1% of my posts are like about my company. I mean, I don't want to do too much of it because people are smart enough. They can see that if they like who I am and what I'm talking about, they'll go look at my profile and see that I work at Sensei. I don't have to like talk about Sensei until my face is blue. And actually, I think this is the biggest thing that people get wrong about LinkedIn. They use it as a kind of promotional tool. And it can be, but don't make it so. Do it because you're authentically passionate about some things. Post about your company every now and then. Of course, if you have a big moment, big launch, big funding round, whatever it is that you're proud of. But if you just only post that time, people just don't care about it. So for example, one of the companies that I think is doing really well in this right now is Lovable, this kind of vibe coding platform out of Sweden, right? Anton, the CEO, he posts a lot on LinkedIn, but he's always posting pictures of himself with team members. This person just joined. I'm so excited to work with this person. And it's just like becomes very authentic. Will he post about the company and some cool shit they're doing? Yes, but it's not actually that often. It's mostly around the people he's around with and look at where I am and what we're doing together. It's really cool. And it just creates like, this is a guy on the move. They're doing cool stuff. He's surrounding himself with people who are positive and excited and just, really like looking forward to doing magical things together. I think it's a much better strategy than just going like, okay, we just launched this feature or this thing. It's like, God, nobody wants to read that.
And it's kind of reverse, because it actually, when you pitch as you said, when you pitch yourself or pitch your company, no one really cares. Nobody wants to read that. When you share the genuine, authentic thought or an insight or an experience you had calling someone out, whatever it is, people then want to go see what you're working on. Right?
Exactly.
What ends up
That's
happening.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Psychology here.
That's right. That's right. Well, go figure. People want to buy from people. Huh. Surprise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And I loved what you said. It doesn't have to be this big insight. It doesn't have to be this amazing post. Because if you're always needing for it to be this amazing thing, you're never gonna post. Right. You just never are. So
yeah, I coached quite a few people on this, and they're terrified of it because they go, what if it's stupid? What if nobody cares? It's like, yeah, so what? Who cares? Just go for it. I write a lot of stuff that nobody cares about. It's fine. I'm still here. It's not going to end your career. I mean, unless you're really stupid, but that's so rare. It's so rare that somebody gets in so much trouble because of their LinkedIn profile or whatever profile that they'll get fired over it. They might get asked by their boss, hey, take this down. This wasn't really great. I've actually had that happen before. This happened in my last company. The HR team reached out because I posted something about some layoffs, and we had just done some layoffs. So maybe it was a little insensitive. And they're like, hey, could you not post this right now? Like, okay, fair enough. Like sometimes just tell me, right? It's like, it's not the end of the world, right? But just like get out of the fear of judgment.
Right. It's judgment. And I ask people, because as you said, what if nobody likes it? Or what if 10 people think it's really stupid? And I asked them, like, what if, right? Can your ego handle a few people thinking your post sucks? I asked. And they're like, oh, yeah, my ego.
That's a great question.
And
that's
then
a
I'm
great
like, okay,
I'm going to start using that.
Yeah.
I'm going to start using it. Can your ego handle it? I'm like, yeah, of course you can. I mean, like, haven't you been told before that an idea is stupid?
Right. Yeah, all the time. Like, who cares? One of the things, and this is really relevant to this conversation, is around outcomes. And you've talked about that outcomes, when you really worship outcomes, that toxic behavior can really develop and you probably actually don't hit the outcome that you want anyway. I would love to just hear you share more about that. And instead of focusing on outcomes, what should people focus on?
Yeah, I mean, I have been working over 25 years, and some companies have been great and some have been disasters, as we talked about. And one of the things I've become so aware of is that the reason why companies can be a disaster, or a lot of the reason why we have these kind of ill effects in society of some companies, well, I think Facebook has probably had quite a bit of damage to how society works, and X and so on, is because we've had leaders who have been obsessed with growth at all costs. And so when you have that, that means that the outcome matters more than anything. No matter how we get there doesn't really matter as much as just the outcome itself. And that leads to a lot of, I think, ill consequences in society. I think it leads to a lot of toxic cultures in companies because it just becomes every person for themselves. And so what I think is much more relevant is that companies create a culture where the thing that what you do matters as much as the outcome itself. And so, and the way I would describe it is that, let's say your goal is to reach 100 million in revenue over the next 3 years as a company, right? You're a startup, you're doing well, you want to reach 100 million. Okay, great. Can you control that you're going to hit 100 million? Well, how do you control that? Well, you control it by providing an environment where people do incredible work every single day. So the way I would think about it is, what you can control is the inputs. And what is an input? The way you show up every day, the way you collaborate, the energy you have, the passion you have for the work you're doing, the passion you have for your team, the passion you have for your project. You can control that 100% every single day. It doesn't mean it's easy. If there's something happening in your life, you're going through a divorce, somebody just passed away, your kid is being a jerk to you, somebody cuts you off in traffic, all these things, big or small, it can really affect you. There's no doubt about it. We're all human. It doesn't really change the fact that the way you show up every day for your team, for the project, for the work you do, is in your control. If it was easy, everybody would do it perfectly all the time, obviously, but we're not perfect, right? So that's where grit and fortitude and determination comes in. And then the other thing you control is output. And what I mean is the end product of something you produce. You can kind of look at that, I think, objectively and say, is this great? How does it compare to others in the market? How does it compare to the standards we have set for ourselves? So, for example, a new sales policy, a new marketing campaign, a new HR way of recruiting people, and so on. You can kind of put up something that you're really proud of, that's best in class, that hasn't been done before, right? You have the courage to do so. So you can control input and you can control output, but you can't really control outcomes. So let's get back to, if you're trying to reach 100 million in revenue, but the team is dysfunctional, you're showing up with a bad attitude, the collaboration is not really there, nobody communicates well, and the work they're putting out there is kind of subpar. Do you think you're going to hit 100 million? Could it happen? Potentially, but it's probably pretty unlikely. Now, if you show up with a great attitude, you do the hard work, you work well together, you build on courageous thoughts, strategies that are game-changing, you put out amazing product, are you going to get to 100 million? I still don't know, but at least you're going to be much more likely to do so than if you do the opposite. And so my point is, reward how people are showing up, how they're communicating, collaborating, the right energy, the right passion. That's what matters in getting you to the outcome you desire. It's not to say that outcome doesn't matter. Of course it does. If you go to a board, you're trying to raise funding, outcome matters a lot. And you want to still hold people accountable to that. Maybe 50% of your bonus is related to the outcome. But what I'm saying is, you should also reward the way that people show up every day. And I think we miss that so often. All these companies, like you were just saying earlier, have these values they put on their wall: act fast, act like an owner, take intelligent risks. And then you ask, well, what are you doing to hold people accountable to these things? And then they go, no, nothing really, right? I've never seen anybody really say yes. And then it just goes back to whatever it takes to get this thing done. It just creates a lot of toxic environments, because then it becomes every person for themselves. There's not really a shared operating system for how things, Uber was an incredible ride for you, but it was also, sounds like, some toxic cultures there. Same at WeWork, right? Same with some of the other companies. So, and it's because I think we only valued that kind of growth at all costs in some ways. And looking back on it, my mistake is not pushing harder on also really valuing how you get there. And what's interesting is I have a 19-year-old who's in college, and if you ask the new generation, they really care more than ever about how you get there, the work that goes into it, the culture that's created around it. I think we've always cared, but I think the new generation, wow, they really care. They don't just want to live in a world where it's just like growth at all costs, outcome at all costs, because they've seen the society we've created based on that. And so if we want to create a better world for all of us, I think we as leaders, we have to figure out how do we hold ourselves to a higher standard and how do we reward that work that goes into creating a higher standard for all of us. And so what I'm suggesting is maybe your bonus should be tied to the way you show up every day. You can decide if it's 10%, 20%, 30%. Doesn't really, but until you actually get rewarded for it, what's going to change?
Oh, so beautifully said. So many golden nuggets in there as well. We get to wrap up in a few minutes, but I do want to really ask you I can't agree with you more on how important is the way that you show up, right? Energized, passionate, envision, optimistic, all those kinds of things really matter. And if someone's listening to this and they're recognizing like, holy shit, the way that I've been showing up as a founder or in my executive role is just not that, right? I just haven't been bringing my best self to work. There can be a shame response in the way that I've been showing up.
It's true.
Right. And I'm curious how you think about that from where I am now to where I want to be in the way that I show up. And how can I think about that in an empowering, constructive way?
I think that the first step is recognition and self-awareness around this. Once you have that, then it's about having compassion and empathy with yourself about how you make that transition. Because, of course, there's probably going to be some guilt and some shame in how you've shown up from being maybe in kind of the classic Silicon Valley term. A wartime CEO is very different than a peacetime CEO. And I think that trope has probably played out a little bit, but it probably is some CEOs who've been so used to just driving hard because it was all about just felt like a never ending battle that they haven't really kind of created the constructive environment around them where people can rise up. It was all about kind of their vision and driving towards that. I think it starts with self-awareness and self-reflection. And then it requires a lot of like compassion and not losing all of it, because there's probably some things that you have done that have helped get you to where you are today. Like, again, coming back to Adam and Travis, right? Again, it's easy for us to play armchair quarterback here on their psychology, but there's probably some things that I would absolutely keep in their personalities that have managed to get them where they are. But there are probably some things that they should absolutely change that they probably didn't even realize when they were doing it had a really negative downstream because maybe they didn't see it directly. But if somebody told them and they were open, because again, that's why it starts with self-reflection and honesty. If they were open to hearing it, they might have changed that behavior as well. I mean, I think a lot of CEOs, they don't get surrounded enough, honestly, with people who can hold a mirror up to themselves. But even if they do, and some CEOs, they do, it still doesn't change the fact that I think it starts with self-reflection and awareness. I think Sam Altman is in the news right now, right? And he had such a meteoric rise, and he seems like a smart guy. I've never met him, so I'm just talking from what I read. And the commentary you see now in the media is a lot that he has no awareness about all the stuff that's happening around him, because maybe he either people are not holding a mirror up to him, so that's shame on the people around him, or he's not self-aware enough, then it's shame on him, right? If he doesn't actually take the time to really like think deeply about what the impact is of all the things he's doing. And I just think, but it starts with like kind of those two things, self-awareness and reflection, but also like the mirror of what you should change.
I want to give you a chance to self-promote. Where can people find you? I know you just published a book, the Human Success Playbook. So tell us about the book briefly, where people can find you.
Yeah. Well, I'm finally an author. I've been wanting to be an author my whole life. My mother has written over 15 books, so I'm finally an author. The book came out on May the 4th, Star Wars Day, because I'm a nerd, so that fits very well with my brand. It's about how humans and AI will coexist and how like we as leaders can build better companies by actually thinking deeply about how to integrate AI with a human culture, and not at the expense of humans, but really kind of together. And it talks about, governance, and it talks about how to set up the right structures and how to kind of use AI for what it's good at and so on. But it's really written as a narrative form. I've always loved storytelling. So it's written more like a hero's journey, like a Luke Skywalker who goes on a journey. He has a moment of crisis. And then, so it's about this CEO who has a moment of crisis, and he decides to go on a journey to kind of solve this for his company. And Yeah, it's a fun book. You know, it just came out. It's called the Human Success Playbook. You can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on my company's website, sensei.com. You can also find me just on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, if you want to have a chat or anything, I'm usually fairly open to doing that. Just go find me on LinkedIn. Hard to ignore once you've connected with me because I post a lot. Just be warned.
Yeah. Well, based on this conversation, I'm sure it's valuable content because I loved this conversation. Really loved having you. Tons of beautiful insights here that honestly have been helpful to me. I can only imagine the audience as well. So, Robin, thanks for the time, energy, insights. Really appreciate having you here.
Thanks, Badley. Take care, man.